Eric Barone, the creator of Stardew Valley, is known as Concerned Ape. So they made a shopkeeper called Concerned Monkey.
I got my money's worth out of Lawnmower Simulator.
You did?
Because I got it for free.
Yes.
And I tried it, and I played maybe an hour.
Has it been that now that they don't have a lot of the limitations, like for instance in the Space Invaders case that you have, that it has hindered the creativity of coming around with new innovative problem solving? Oh man, you chilling out, Alex? I'm chilling.
Not yet, but I feel like we're about to.
Oh yeah, we're totally gonna do that. Hey everybody, welcome to a chill version of Total Pebble Knockdown. I am Nathan.
And I am Alex, and today we're gonna just chill out. Today we're gonna talk about some cool topics in video games.
Yes, we certainly are. We kind of did this a little bit impromptu. But we're going to do a little bit of stream of consciousness with a few topics on video games that I hope everybody will enjoy. So I think we should just get into it.
Cool, let's jump right in.
We'll jump right in like we're part of the Pokey Pokey Literature Club. I was actually like one of the alpha backers for the Kickstarter. And so technically I could have been playing the alpha version of the game for the last year and just didn't. So there's that. But the thing is, like, it does a lot of things right. But you can tell that it's still in a somewhat finished state. That there's a lot of stuff that's unfinished, a lot of like placeholder icons and stuff for different parts and pieces, like a lot of celebrations and stuff that are supposed to go into the different years, because basically just upshot is that it's basically I'm not gonna lie, it's just Stardew Valley. It's basically just Stardew Valley, but a different version of Stardew Valley, where they were like, well, we're gonna modernize it, and we're gonna it's not gonna be pixel graphics anymore, and we're gonna have more characters in it, and we're gonna have more romance options, and it's gonna be set on an island, and you'll be able to do like dungeon diving, but like, be able to actually do diving, and the graphics are going to be nice and cartoony, and we're going to try to streamline some stuff, but they make it pretty clear it is just Stardew Valley. Like, they took so much away from the structure, how it's organized, how the days run, the activities that you do.
Yeah, it's Stardew Valley clone.
It's definitely Stardew Valley, which I think people were planning on. My favorite thing, though, to just because they are not even disguising it. If you go out in the woods, there's a monkey, right? And the monkey has like a little shop, and it comes out, and the monkey is called Concerned Monkey. And if you don't know, because I'm sure you don't, but
I do not.
Eric Barone, the creator of Stardew Valley, is known as Concerned Ape. So they made a shopkeeper called Concerned Monkey that sells special
there you go.
stuff.
That's how you do it.
But at any rate, no. One of the big problems is like they tell you about like festivals and events and all of this other stuff that's there. When it rolls around, though, it becomes obvious like that the content really isn't there yet to actually do any of it. It's just that they're going to. I went to like one of the first festivals, and it was in spring, and they did, and again, this is exactly like Stardew Valley. You go to the beach, there's a giant pot, and you can put an ingredient in the pot to like add to the community potluck. But you go up to the pot, and it says, this will be available as soon as the developers think to implement it. It's like, thanks. So I'm doing their version of like the community center stuff, and I'm doing their version of like the museum stuff and the diving part, and trying to make what is essentially their version of the bears, these big turtles that you can move when you give them the right thing. Trying to get those dealt with, but I'm realizing like a lot of the content, especially just because I'm going through year 1, isn't there yet. There's a lot of like tier 2 stuff that isn't even available. It just says tier 2 stuff not available. Don't know if it ever does become available. So I'm like, well, I don't know. Should I just hold off on playing it anymore until it actually has more content in it? Because I feel like I'm gonna have to miss a bunch of stuff in year 1, go and start playing year 2, and hope that they update it by then, and then just play a whole other year to actually do half the stuff. It looks real good, and it plays really nicely, and I think some of the improvements that they made were nice. But I don't know if it's in a finished enough state for the model that they use. And I'm a little sad because, like, when I first played Stardew Valley back when it originally came out, it was all there.
Yeah.
You know? And that was, like, one dude granted, he worked on it for, like, 6 years or something like that. But it was all there when it originally launched. This is a more ambitious project with more people and, you know, obviously they're putting more into it, but I would have liked to see it maybe fleshed out to the point where it felt like a season was like an actual season with stuff to do.
How many people are on the team for this game?
I don't remember, but I think it's like 5 or 6.
Okay.
It's not a tremendously large team. And again, they have to do the coding. They have a lot of art assets that they have to go into this. Yeah, there's a lot to it. But you can tell there's multiple things, like just the enemies that are in the dungeons right now are there's one slime, and then there's one like arachnid, like red spider thing. Those are the 2 kinds of monsters you meet. I haven't met any other monsters. Those are it. And I've been through the earth, and there's a water temple. I got to the bottom of the water temple. And then there's 2 other temples you can see, because they're supposed to be like the 4 points, like 4 elemental stuff. There's 2 others. They haven't unlocked, even though I've gone through the water temple. Don't know if they ever do. I think it's just not implemented content yet. Again.
Wait.
So I don't know. It's something. I'll probably step away from it for a bit. Until they maybe do an update and
you've got to remember the fact you're in the alpha version, so there's gonna be a lot missing.
Well, this is actually the game preview version now. They've moved out of alpha, and now they have the game preview version itself.
So this is like a proof of concept? Is that what that is?
It's to the point where the general population can just purchase it. When it was in alpha, you had to specifically be a backer for the alpha version in order to get it on Steam. Now you can actually purchase it on Steam and a bunch of other Play stores as an early access title. Essentially, it's an early access title. Game
so they need more money.
Yeah, they probably need more money to keep going with it. Or they were like, let's put it out now, because we've already committed to all the stuff we're going to put into the game, but we could probably use the influx of money to make that more to make that more possible. Because that Kickstarter did very, very well. So I don't know if they needed the money for development, but I have a feeling they wanted to try and put it out there so that they could show actual monetary growth by just putting it out in a general audience. Because it probably would be like another year or so before they implement a lot of the stuff that they said that they put in.
So was there a crafting system in Coral Island that you really enjoyed that was fleshed out, or was it just kind of meh?
The crafting system is a lot to do with just like an in-menu crafting system. You get your basic materials, and then you can combine them in specific ways to make a lot of the stuff. You do then get a few different, like, stations that you can utilize to turn, like, trash into, like, either soil or, like, a scrap, so that you can make other things. What else can you do? Like furnaces and that kind of thing, so you can make bars and all that good stuff. A lot of this actual crafting into objects are in like a menu system, very similar to what Stardew Valley did. It's all centralized that way. But then when you expand your house out, you also get to have like a kitchen, and so then you can start experimenting with how different ingredients go together, or get recipes and that kind of thing. So it's very similar to the same kind of system that they had, where you had a kitchen in your home that you could use for that specific stuff. Yeah, beyond that, I haven't really seen anything. The other upgrades for the house aren't, like, there yet. aren't quite there yet, so they might expand that out a little bit more, but I'm kind of imagining that it's the same basic process that they went through, where you can, like, turn things into wine. I have kegs, so you can...
Oh, so you're playing 100 Days again.
I'm playing 100 Days again, yeah. You can... They did change a couple things where, like, you can... Oh no, I guess that was pretty much the same. You can make juices, and you can make wines depending on what you put into the kegs. You can make preserves, whatever preserves you're making. You can, for honey, and I was like, well, this kind of makes more sense. I guess that's good. In Stardew Valley, there was something that people didn't know about, where you would make your little apiaries, the little honey, your little honey decks for the bees, yes. Your bee houses.
Not the hollow decks, the honey decks.
Yeah, the honey decks. You'd put your bee houses out, and they'd produce honey. And honey's a good resource to have. Yes. However, a lot of people didn't know that if you plant flowers near where the bee houses are, they'll produce specific kinds of flower. So if you put, like, clover or, like, lilies or something, and you put them right next to the bee houses when they produce honey, they'll produce lily honey, or they'll produce daisy honey, and they'd always be, like, way more expensive and specialized than just basic wild honey. And in this one, they have the bee houses, and what you do is you just put the flowers that you want to turn into honey, and you put them in as a resource into the bee house, and then wait for them to process into honey. So
that turns the apiary into a Minecraft furnace.
Pretty much.
That's a weird way to do it.
A little bit, but you know,
did you give them feedback about it?
I haven't really given them feedback.
Well, there's the issue.
There's the issue. Yeah. I don't think that it's a bad system. I just always am surprised by, like, how different prices are in the game. Like, there was a flower, it's like the Titanic flower. You could just go into the woods and you can collect it during the right time of year. It's a forage item. And I was like, oh cool, I have these now. Gee, it's a foraged item, I wonder if I can turn it into honey. And you can turn it into, like, this black Titanus honey. And most of the honeys that are in the that I was collecting might be like 100 or maybe 200 in the game currency. I get this special, I get this black honey from this one flower that you can just collect by going out into the woods. And I chuck it in my bin, and it's worth like 3,000. And I'm like, well, I gotta spam that as much as possible. And then if it's higher qualities, you know, you can get better stuff. They have a lab where you can increase the star rating of, like, seeds, which will give you a better chance at, like, bronze, silver, or gold level stuff. And what I have found, though, that I I did like as a change is that if I put like a gold level grape in my keg, I guess I'm pretty likely to have like a gold level wine when I take it out. And in Stardew Valley, it didn't matter what star the product was, it would just give you the basic stuff at the end. And then you could like age it up afterward.
Right.
So there's they made some good streamlining things. You can expand your backpack out more than you could in the previous one. You can get up to like 40 slots, I guess. Yeah, and everything's on cycles. Like certain shops are closed on different times of the day. You have a museum, just like they had a museum before, but it gets expanded out, and you can actually go around the museum, look at all the fish that you've collected for them. They make a little aquarium for you to go and look at.
And you like watch all the fish swim in the aquarium?
You can.
Nice.
As you collect the fish, they end up in the aquarium, and they're swimming around the different tanks in the aquarium. When you collect bugs for them, there's like an insect house. You can go there. The butterflies are flying around and everything. When you collect artifacts from under the water, from under sea, there's a collection for that, and they make a display. So, yeah, I mean, there's neat stuff that Coral Island does that I think improves upon the formula, but it hasn't been fully implemented yet. So,
yeah.
And considering that it does have to do with like going through those seasons and everything, I get concerned about doing it all because I won't see a lot of the content until a whole other season passes by, and
right.
That takes time. It takes time to get there.
So your thoughts for the early access or alpha build then? Or would you recommend it to people looking for something similar to Stardew Valley, like when it's more complete?
I would say that it's definitely something you'd want to keep an eye on. I don't know if in its current state you'd necessarily want to get it. Just because you're gonna be like, why are the graphics not coming up for certain things? Why can't I actually interact with the world when it comes to festivals and stuff? They don't tell me when those happen. Like,
right.
What am I supposed to do with that? I guess there was supposed to be a festival here. There was supposed to be like a pet day. I haven't even had a pet. I don't know. There's a few pets around the town. There's like a boyfriend-girlfriend cat pair who's called Peanut and Butter, and they walk around town together and stuff. No, it's got a lot of neat stuff in it, which I like, but it's tricky because it feels a little bit the way I felt about Everspace 2, because I played that when it first came into Game Preview 2. Yeah. And you'd be like, wow, this is really great. And then you reach those, like, thresholds where you can see the content ran out before the next update. And it's like, oh, you don't have access to the next tier of stuff or the next tier of abilities in the case of Coral Island, where, like, I've upgraded my farming a bunch, and I've upgraded my dungeon diving and stuff, foraging, but I only had, like, 3 skills I could unlock, and the other ones in that tier are still locked, and there isn't a second tier to get to, so I just can't utilize any of them. When they do an update, I'm gonna have all these points I can instantly just throw into all the new stuff that they put in, because they just don't have it. Yeah.
Well, how many hours did you end up putting in Stardew Valley overall? How many hours do you have in that game?
Probably, all put together, probably a couple hundred.
Okay, so you'll probably really enjoy this once they flesh it out.
Right, because I've probably put a good 20, a season takes a little bit of time. So, you figure you're waking up at 6, and it's like an hour is a minute for in-game time. And they basically at 12 o'clock, they're going, it's getting late. and then at 1 o'clock you pass out if you're not home. Not 2.
We've been over that mechanic before.
Yeah. They now made it 1 o'clock instead of 2 o'clock. Oh, okay. The last 2 weeks, 37.6.
You've gotten your money's worth out of it already.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I had already technically paid for it 2 years ago, so it's like...
Well, I mean, you've probably put enough money.
Oh, yeah.
Like, if you break it down by how long you've played versus how much you paid for it, you've probably gotten your money's worth.
I mean, yeah, at some point maybe we'll even talk about, like... There's always this thing about, like, your hours versus your money spent in, and how people calculate that, and I always feel like there's a quality versus quantity argument that you can get for that, but...
There is.
Yeah.
We could talk about that. Maybe we could do that as our next segment.
We could probably do that as our next segment. Because, you know, I've played 5-hour games that were worth the money I paid for it.
Mm-hmm.
And I played 2-hour games that were worth the money they're asking. And I've played 100-hour games that are not. You know. But yeah, no, for what I pay, like 37.6 hours, and that's been, like, I'm in winter right now. Winter's kind of a boring month. There's nothing to grow. So I'm just kind of like seeing if I can just tool around the dungeons a little bit more. Maybe upgrade my stuff while I'm here.
Yeah.
No, it's worth it. It's just as addictive as any of the cozy games that are like Stardew Valley, right? There were some other ones that were in a similar vein that I had been looking forward to. At some point, I wanted to play Bear and Breakfast, which always looked so much fun.
Right, that one looked cute.
Yeah, I mean, just the idea you're going to be a bear that runs a bed and breakfast is just instantaneously, like, sold. There's ones like that I just get into, and I know that that's going to be a good portion of my life. Coral Valley will hit that for me, but it's not at a level of Stardew Valley yet, even the initial version of Stardew Valley. But I appreciated that they wanted to make something that wasn't like the pixel graphic chiptune sort of style, that they wanted to make it more fleshed out and vibrant. And
right.
Setting it on an island helps with that. The water looks really great. The underwater section is fun. Being able to go under the waves. They make these allusions to, like, the sea creatures just kind of like passing by really briefly, so you can't quite see what it is. Like, there's mysteries under the sea that you need to uncover. Neat stuff like that. Really cool idea. But yeah, I'd like to see it more fully done.
Right.
Before I go too much further, especially before I start a second season. Maybe I could go through winter and just see what's there, but I don't think I want to try playing a second season yet without me knowing that there's more to do next.
Right.
When I get there. So Alex, since I was talking to you about Coral Island, I wanted to say Coral Valley because I intertwine Stardew Valley and Coral Island so much in my head at this point. I was mentioning that whole quantity versus quality debate, and I thought we might want to talk a little bit more about that, because I keep trying to figure out if there's an actual calculation here about what kind of dollars I should be spending, not just on the hours that a game invests me, but of the quality of the game that I'm playing. Have you thought about that before when you're playing something?
Sort of, not in the sense of, like, actually thinking about it mathematically. It's sitting down and going that, but I've definitely thought about the time investment versus the money spent before.
Right. There is always a calculation that I think we do in our heads about, like, okay, it's going to be $60 for this. Am I going to get $60 worth of content out of it?
Right.
And so there was that conversation, I think we talked about it at some point earlier in the year, about Dying Light 2 and how they were talking about how it's a 500-hour long game.
Right.
And trying to break that down about what they mean by that. And the big takeaway a lot of people had is, I don't know if we really want a game that's touting it being 500 hours long. That feels like almost too much of an investment, and that you're just going to be going around doing meaningless busy work for the majority of that time. Like
right, and how you can get away with it in games like an MMO.
Yeah.
But you don't generally say there's 500 hours worth of content in an MMO. You just kind of leave that very vague and just keep adding content because they're live service games.
Right. The live service aspect, too, ends up being a big part of it. But, like, I can't tell you, like, that there are games that necessarily... When it comes to time frame, I think that there is a concerted effort for game companies to try and produce something that is long to the point where they can say it's X number of hours. And so that way they can say, hey, I'm going to justify the price tag on this thing by telling you there's so many hours involved, when a lot of it is just kind of useless. Like, I got into Fallout 4, and no shade, like, Fallout 4 is worth the money you pay for it, regardless of what you pay for it, because the core game is good, and it's fairly lengthy for what it is. But if the game wasn't fun to play, I probably wouldn't care. However, there's the Radiant quests that they use to make it practically endless. And the thing is that the Radiant quests are just a do the same thing over and over and over again style of gameplay. Another colony needs your help.
Yeah,
Thanks,
it's
Preston.
just, oh, X place needs this Y thing done.
Yes, exactly. You go to X to achieve Y and get Z. That's basically it. And that is okay for padding stuff out, but it's not particularly interesting. It's not story-driven. It doesn't really affect anything except for you to just keep playing the game. And I think that it becomes a bit of a crutch for game companies because they use it to pad out when they run out of actual stuff to say with their game. And that becomes a problem. It's not like, to put it in comparison for Fallout terms, a New Vegas, where even the side quest stuff feels like it's meaningful to the storyline, that it's been fleshed out with characters that have development and a storyline that integrates into the landscape for world building. There's very few quests that are just like hey, kill 50 of these things, and then call it good. I don't consider that to be a good gameplay length. I'd rather it be tighter, and I think this comes into landscape too. Like when we talk about how big a world is, space games, you know from playing them, have this problem where they're like, oh, there's, in No Man's Sky, for instance, it's like, there's 5 quadrillion planets to explore. And therefore, it's endless. You never reach your limit. And it's like, yes, but what they had a problem with when it first released was that there wasn't really much to do in that endless universe. And it took a long time for them to actually populate it with content to the point that it's at now, where it's like really good and enjoyable. They kind of were hedging their bets on the fact that the game world was just large.
Right.
And if it's large enough, then people are going to want to play it. So, and that's, I don't really feel like that's true. I feel like I've slept through games that want to tell you that they're long and worth their time, but they're really just there to make me fall asleep.
Oh, Lawnmower Simulator.
I did. I famously lasted about 10 minutes in Lawnmower Simulator on that first one, and I fell asleep, and I woke up, and the lawnmower was just still running there in place on the first one that the first lawn, and I was like, well, I guess it's time to put this away. I'm sure there's a very rich game in here somewhere, but I'm not going to play it.
I got got my money's worth out of Lawnmower Simulator.
You did.
Because I got it for free.
Yes.
And I tried it. And I played maybe an hour.
Yeah.
And then I uninstalled it because it was hot garbage.
Yeah, it's a boring game.
Oh, it's not even that it's boring, it's just bad.
Oh, yeah, controlling your lawnmower just by itself is like, it's like tank controls. Like, I don't really know.
If you would like a better lawn mowing experience, Farming Sim 2022.
Yeah, there's lawn mowing involved in that.
There's a lot of lawn you can mow.
You certainly can. Yeah, I feel like there's this point where they say, like, hey, look, it's 16 times the size, but they don't add 16 times the content.
Mm.
And sometimes when they do, it's not really meaningful content. It's not, like, curated content in the way that you want. It's, like, artificially generated content.
Right. And there's definitely a space where, like, MMOs, open world, and live service games can get away with saying, yeah, we have this large world. You know, either charging a subscription fee in games like World of Warcraft or Final Fantasy Online, where it's like, yeah, we are charging you this fee, but we're also updating our content continuously, and it's live service, and you're playing with hundreds, if not more, other people at a time. Even if you play solo, it's like, I don't mind paying that cost because I know that they're going to continue adding and updating content continuously.
Right.
Whereas a game, perhaps like Coral Island, for instance, where we were just talking about that, there's a finite amount of content in there.
Right. You can go through multiple seasons like you can in a lot of those games. But, you know, your landscape is certainly limited, and your days are limited in terms of what you can do. A lot of those have that problem. I think that there's a general idea that it's like $1 to an hour as like a good value to your investment. Like, if I pay $60, and it's a $60.
That's not even minimum wage.
Yeah, I know. I pay $1 for, you know, per hour, and it's a $60 game. I get 60 hours out of it. That's technically considered good economy for video games. I've heard that used a lot.
I would say if you are paying your game $8 an hour, you should get a solid 5 hours out of it.
Yeah, I feel like we're at a point too, and you know, I'm not as young as I used to be. I don't know if you were aware, but
that's how time works.
That's how time works. Back in my day, I would have a Morrowind that you could just spend all afternoon, day in, day out, playing, you know, tooling around in Morrowind. These days, I just don't have that. Too many games, not enough time. So, you know.
I think this is a totally other discussion as well. The way they make games has changed over the years.
Yeah.
I know earlier you guys were talking about the Legacy of Kain games in the chat. And like those are from an era where the graphics weren't as good.
Right.
As an instance. So they really went full tilt on the story.
Right.
And that's like the PS2 era. You know, RPGs in that era were very story driven. Mm-hmm. And you don't get quite the heavy storytelling elements as much in most games these days. Where it's like fully voice acted, fully narrated. It's got full on like novels worth of dialogue in there.
Oh yeah.
And you do get them sometimes. I mean, BioWare, yeah, there's a novel in there somewhere.
Oh yeah. No, there's
but you have to. But it's not as prevalent as it used to be, and I think part of that is because the focus is swapped from storytelling and narrative to gameplay and graphics.
Yeah.
In a lot of cases.
Yeah. We'll talk about that evolution in segment 3, since we're kind of in stream of conscious this episode to this time. This is kind of nice though. I feel like when I look back on it, though, I appreciate a game like What Remains of Edith Finch, which is really a 3-hour-long game. Like to do literally everything, to get the achievements and everything, is a 3-hour-long game. But I appreciate how they built that narrative, that storytelling, and always kept you engaged the entire time with these interesting stories of the Finch family as you're navigating this house and going through the lives, the last days of each one of your members of the family to a really interesting, satisfying, and emotionally resonant conclusion that I would prefer to a lot of games that were like, jillions of hours, 50 billion guns. It's like, okay, but I get in there and I don't want to play the game. I don't want to enjoy the game. You haven't made it engaging. You've just said, oh, it's a big sandbox. I've played big sandboxes that were nice, but there are a lot that just kind of like rely on the fact that, well, it's big and long. And it's like, maybe that's not the best way I could have put that, but big and long is not exactly the look. It's not just the size of your game, it's how you use it. That's what I'm trying to get at here. It's how you use it.
Right. Well, if we went into the games that I've played the most and have the most hours into, like via Steam, it would be Elite Dangerous.
Yep.
And then Warhammer 40k Inquisitor Martyr.
Yeah.
And then after that is also, I think, Warhammer 40k Dawn of War 2 Retribution, probably.
Okay.
You know, so it's 2 Warhammer games because I really love the lore in that universe. One of them's a Diablo-style ARPG where, yes, you complete the campaign, but there's always more to do, and then they do the seasonal thing now, so you can make a character for a season, level them up, and you get the rewards for that, which is always fun to a point. You play it for a while, and you're like, all right, I'm done with this.
Yeah.
On that end, they're making a new class for that game as well. That's going to be coming out, so you know I'll want to check that out. Elite Dangerous, you know, I think it's I looked a little bit ago while we were talking. It's a £40 title, so it's probably actually about $50. Oh, sorry, it's £50, so it's probably about the same US because they don't usually convert those prices.
Right.
And then they have the one expansion, but you know there is as much as you want to do in there. That universe is huge, so you can do. You know, I play that when I feel like flying around in space and either blowing stuff up or taking cool screenshots and pictures of planets and exploration stuff. And it's, you know, if the storytelling in that game was a little bit more involved, I would fall really a lot deeper into that. But the storytelling up till now hasn't been super involved.
Right.
I mean, they're focusing now, since they shelved their console development for Elite Dangerous, so they could focus on PC only. Right. I don't know if you saw that.
No, I hadn't.
Okay, so the TLDR is they went, hey, so we're going to stop production on all the content for console.
Okay.
It's splitting up our team in ways that aren't really helpful. So they're like, we'll keep the game live on console, but we're not going to give you any new content.
Gotcha. Okay.
And what they did is they went, all right, so we're going to give anyone who is on console a free copy and the ability to convert all their save stuff onto PC so that you can keep playing.
Oh, okay. That's good. Because I was thinking that they were going to get screwed out on this if you bought it. Yeah,
players were upset, and so they listened, and they're like, okay, so anyone who wants to come to PC, you know, not everyone has the PC for it, but we'll give you a free copy, we'll let you copy of your save data, and continue from there, which is really nice on their end.
Sure.
But they wanted to be able to focus just on the PC development, because they wanted to move everything forward simultaneous, and console... I know we've been over this before. When you have like something on PC versus something on console, the reason that the patches, for instance, don't line up is because to go through consoles, you have to go through all of their backend stuff. So you have to get their quality checks and all that stuff.
Got it.
And it takes a lot longer to get verified through like Xbox or PlayStation.
Sure.
Doing it through Steam or through your own launcher, you don't really have as much you have to go through. And I've talked about this with my friend who worked for Neocore on Inquisitor Martyrs. Like, yeah, that's the reason PC and console are so different, and why everything on the console is way far behind. It's because they need to have it go through all that stuff, and sometimes they'll come back and be like, this didn't meet whatever quality assurance or whatever, and you have to fix it. That's why Skyrim on Nintendo Switch had to get fixed before they let them sell it. They're like, you guys need to fix this. And they're like, what?
Yeah. Exactly. Well, yeah, different companies, especially the console makers, have different standards about what they want on their systems, you know.
Right.
And
So for
encoding, the other thing is the encoding on the different systems is
right.
Yeah.
So Elite now has gone forward on PC, getting all the editions of the game kind of like on par between the base game and Horizons, which is now included in the base game of Elite, and then Odyssey, which is a new expansion. They're trying to make it so everyone can do stuff together, even if like kind of like the same page. Even if you don't have the new expansion, you can still play with friends.
Sure.
Who have the base game, whatever. They can't do the stuff you could do in the expansion, like on foot, which is fine. But they're going forward with their story. They're like, we really want to go forward with like the storytelling and stuff. So the first thing they did is they had an in-game cinematic, and they had this huge thing with the aliens go on that backfired on the Federation, I think, and their super weapon exploded.
Nice.
So it's like, okay, storytelling. Maybe they'll do more of that.
Yeah,
that'd be cool.
Yeah. Well, that's good. I mean, I think that there's probably a place in here too about like getting what you want out of a game that has nothing to do with the hours that go into it. That there are games that I play for different reasons.
Yes.
Like, I will play some games because I want to be invested in the narrative and the storyline. I will play some because I want to be super sneaky, and I want to be or crafty or tactical. And then there's ones where I just want to shoot things really hard.
Then you play Borderlands.
Then I play Borderlands again for the 50th time. Because honestly, Borderlands, I still say, is my version of video game crack. It's like, I can't help it. You go in, you smash things, loot explosion everywhere, giant, like, raining down from the sky stuff. Ooh, dopamine levels.
Certain itches, yeah.
There's dopamine explosions all over the place, like, oh, I got a legendary, yes, and then, I don't play that for the storyline, which is good, because the story has not been good, especially by the third one, but, But I play that for a completely different reason, and so, but if it was like a narrative one, I was mentioning Edith Finch, but any of those sort of games, or Firewatch is another good example. I understand that it's only a few hours long, and that's okay. And even though Firewatch, I think when I bought it was like $15, and it was like 3 hours or 4 hours long, I don't regret buying it. I didn't want a refund. I was like, oh, no, you made a really nice game there, Santo Campo. You really did, and it was worth the money that I paid because that experience was worth the time I put into it.
Right, and I think that's what it boils down to. Is it, if you're paying $15 for a 3-hour experience, but it's a really good experience, you're not going to feel slighted. You're not going to feel bad about that. If you're paying $60 for a 40-hour slog, you might not feel as good about that. It's like, okay, I just did this grueling campaign. It was slow-paced. I didn't enjoy the first half at all. I know for you, it's probably like Final Fantasy, you'd think, I would assume.
Yes. Yeah.
Where the first 30 hours is a linear corridor, and then the world opens up.
I hated that part. Yeah. It's very, very boring.
Which, if the story is good, they can get away with.
Right.
In most cases, like Final Fantasy X, for instance, I have actually, over the years, probably good 400 hours plus in that game as well. And it's just like, the story's there. It was fun. I enjoyed doing what I did, and I did grinding for certain stuff in-game that I wanted to see. but I enjoyed every aspect of it. And like building your ultimate weapon or building a customized weapon that now has a break damage limit on it that shouldn't. It's like, all right, this is fun, but I had to grind for materials.
Right. When the grind starts setting in, I don't consider those to be quality hours. I consider that to be the point where I'm now trying to slog through the game to get to the fun. And
Yes.
so I don't really count those as hours in the same way. Yeah, I just feel like there's a calculation that we do in our heads that gamers have gotten used to over the years about like your dollar to hour ratio, and I feel like that eventually has to change, especially with the indie market being so strong as it is now. There's a lot of really quality indie games that just do not have the time to make the length of a game that you might be used to with like AAA titles.
Right.
And I think of it more like if I go to a theme park or I go to, any other thing where I would get entertainment value out. And mostly the thing I always find games to be really useful and economical by comparison to movies. What do I pay for a movie ticket for a 2-hour long movie? I'm going to be paying some serious cash. I have to pay admission to, It's a Small World After All. If I go to Disney World, I'm going to be paying, I don't even know what the ticket prices are at Disney World now, but it's not cheap. That dollar per hour calculation is hard to come by almost anywhere else, and I would totally understand if it was just a really solid 30-hour or a 20-hour experience. I remember when Outer Worlds came out, and, out of the gate, Outer Worlds was probably going to be quite a banger of a game. It's an Obsidian-based RPG in space. Yes.
I would like to say I just Googled it for you. In the standard theme park ticket, a 1 to 10 day ticket? What? Is this... Sorry. Is this for Walt Disney World?
Or is this just theme parks overall?
Okay, I don't know why it's a 1 to 10 day ticket.
Okay.
But I think it says a 1 day ticket, ages 10 plus, $109 for Disney.
Yeah, and that's not even including what you're going to pay when you get in. So
yeah, that's not including all the everything else combined.
Yeah,
that's just I mean, it gives you access to all the rides. I don't think you have to pay for those, but
no, but you need to get a fast pass if you actually want to get onto them in the time frame.
Yeah, so consider going to Disney for $110.
Yeah, exactly.
And the fact you could buy 2 AAA priced games.
Yes. Yeah.
So you either get a half a day of fun at Disney or 2 games that you could spend probably a good 80 hours in.
Right. Yeah, but like I was mentioning, so Outer Worlds was a great game when it came out, and it was an Obsidian one, and they were I think they were taking a little bit of a shot at Bethesda by that point. Shots across the bow. Yeah, we can.
Which is great because they're both owned by the same company now.
Yeah, they are. So everyone's like, "Oh, does that mean we get New Vegas too?" I don't think that's quite how that works. But when Outer Worlds came out, there were criticisms made that it wasn't as long as epic RPGs of its type, because they were trying to compare it against Bethesda's 100, 200 hour long epics. And Outer Worlds was 30 to 40 hours long. But I think that that's kind of undercutting what the game was, because the game was worth the money for those hours that you put in and let you go to many different worlds. It didn't have fully fleshed out planets that you explored. You went to the specific areas of those planets where the story was. You went through those areas. And yeah, I mean, could they have put a bunch of bullshit in where you could have just wandered around a desolate planet like maybe they're going to be doing with Starfield? We'll find out. But that you could have just done that and it would have expanded. Yeah, you probably would have gotten more hours out of it, but you wouldn't have enjoyed it. You did get something out of the experience that they put in the 30-hour game that they gave you, and got a quality product for it. So I'd like gamers to start rethinking that in terms of not just the hours in, but of the experience you get from the game itself. and that the experience is worth something outside of how long it is.
Right.
Yeah. So that's our take on it, though. Quality versus quantity. How does everybody else feel about it? Feel free to get in touch with us over on our Discord channel if you'd like to discuss it a little bit more. How do you calculate the value of a game if it's a good value? I'd be interested to know. Let's do one more. Let's just jump off of that one. We're delving even deeper.
No, another delving deeper.
So now we get to delve deepest. Jumping off of the last segment, actually, Alex, about they're making games different these days.
Yeah, they are.
Let's talk about
They don't.
that.
This segment can be titled "They Don't Make Them Like They Used to."
Yeah, back in my day, I remember when we had to move from 8 to 16-bit, and we liked it. We loved it. We appreciated our 16-bit graphics.
You know,
SNES.
to start on this, they don't make them like they used to. You know, I am actually not a really big fan of retro-style games.
I remember this. Wasn't that one of the big problems that you had with games like Stardew Valley and the like? The pixel graphics?
Just, you know, I am of an age that we are where, you know, had an NES when I was younger. I had the old 16, whatever, 32-bit graphics. I don't remember what an NES is, but, you know.
NES was the 8.
Oh, 8-bit? Even better.
SNES was 16. Yeah.
Okay. So, you know, I grew up through that. In elementary school was when, like, home PCs were starting to be a thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I went through the evolution of 5.5-inch to 3.5-inch floppy, where you had to boot everything on your computer had to be booted off of the disk.
Yeah, in CDOS.
In DOS prompt.
Yeah.
And then from 3.5 floppy to the computer having enough memory to store things on its own, to CD, to DVD. And so my evolution growing up has been through the entirety of computing and what has been available to us. Mm-hmm. And I know the Nintendo itself came out around the year I was born in 87. Mm-hmm. You know, it's about that same age. So I've grown up through the evolution of all these gaming things. So playing older games, for instance, NES titles, SNES titles, stuff like that I grew up with is one thing. I actually explained about Space Invaders the other day to Graveyard.
Yes.
Because she was not aware that the reason that the game played the way it did was because, well, back in that time, there was not enough RAM on the system.
Yeah.
So what happened was this, you destroyed the Space Invaders as they came down. Every time you destroyed one, it freed up a little bit of memory.
Yeah.
And so by the time you're freeing all but the last couple, they're going way, way faster than they expected because they didn't code for that properly.
Right.
They're moving faster because the computer
can actually process it faster. Yeah.
Can process it way faster.
Yeah.
Because it's freed up all that space.
Right.
And you're thinking about it now, and it's not a lot of space that it had to free up.
No. But if you remember the old, like, Lisa 2 era, like, Macs and stuff that they had, there wasn't a lot to work with either. You know, those had, like, I don't know, kilobytes maybe of storage on them. It was pretty limited. Yeah.
Oh, I lost you for a second.
Oh, okay. There were like just kilobytes of space on those old Macs, like those really old ones.
And now we're having games that take up gigabytes.
Yeah,
you know, not half a terabyte, but like hundreds of gigabytes.
Really. Some of those, yeah, it really is.
So for me, the retro thing is like I'll go back and play Super Mario Brothers 3, no problem. It's something I grew up with and I have a nostalgia for.
Mm-hmm.
But games like Stardew Valley, newer games that take the pixel graphic approach, unless it's very stylized and looks decent, I don't really care for.
Yeah, the pixel graphics of the modern era where they do it as a retro style, I think it's for a completely different reason than it was done originally. Originally, it was just technical limitations, and now it's more done to create a nostalgic style that you can enjoy. I don't mind it quite as much as I used to, just because I've seen it done so well so many times. And there are a few times where I was like, is this actually pixel graphic? Like sometimes They make it so stylized that you forget about it entirely. But I do, that being said, very much appreciate like seeing hand-drawn or fully rendered, stylized, cel-shaded sort of art styles. Something really interesting and different in the way it's presented. Like when I played Spiritfarer, which is, again, is like a cozy game that's very, very good. But that whole game is like this beautiful hand-drawn art style that really pops off of the screen. I played Sable for a little bit, which has like a wireframe sort of art style, and it washes out the color and brings the color back in more vibrantly when the sun comes up and goes down. And so they're not exactly the just fully fleshed out, like triple A kind of title, megapixel graphic kind of display. They're different kinds of styles that are outside of that, but they look really good, and they're apart from the pixel graphic. I think that that's given people a lot more freedom in how they want to make those graphics and the different kinds of styles that they can utilize, without it being just the constraint of, I want to make it look as pretty as possible.
Right, and I get it, but for me, it's like, modern graphics being what they are. I don't need to have it look realistic, but I like having something that I enjoy looking at, and I don't typically enjoy looking at just pixel graphics myself.
To the outside observer, I don't know how much you would see a difference in the last 10 years or so of like video game graphics or sound design. Once we got up to like 1080p or even 720p for like resolution, it gets kind of minimal in terms of what they're presenting.
It looks better and better and better, but it's not giant leaps and bounds between 8 pixels and then 1080p.
Oh yeah, no, it's nothing like the leaps that they used to have where you'd go from the NES with 8-pixel graphics, 8-bit graphics, to like the SNES with 16. It's not like the difference between when the N64 was touting that it's a 64-bit system and the PlayStation's only a 32, and you can totally see the difference.
It's kind of like if you were to have like the evolution of the Pokemon games. Like if you were to...
Yes.
You don't have to put this graphic on screen if you want to tinker and make one and go the original Pokemon to like Gen 2, 3, 4, each generation.
Yes.
Like how they look. Like that is a span of how technology has come.
Yes.
And just how stylized you can do things.
Mm-hmm.
So like, Pokemon, I can go back and play Pokemon, and then I'm like, okay, this is a bit of a slog in the original game, and they make it a lot more convenient in newer games with the same formula, for instance.
Right. Right.
But yeah, that's just one aspect, I think, of them not making games the same way they used to, is because graphically things have changed so much.
Right, and I think that the front-loading part of that, the graphics and the sound design and the cinematic qualities to the games became more of a forefront because they had the ability and the hardware that they could utilize for it. Once upon a time, when they didn't have that, they really had to hammer home that the gameplay, but more importantly, that the storyline and the character development, the writing, was... Well,
especially gameplay, too. Again, with Pokemon as an example, there's not a really intensive storyline in that.
Right.
Like it's pretty basic storyline. It's child gets Pokemon, go become the best.
Pokemon, yeah, become the very best like no one ever was. Get from Pallet Town to the Indigo Plateau.
Right, but that's more of an action, action RPG maybe. And then games like Zelda. I don't know if they even told much story in the original Zeldas.
In the original Zelda, no. I guess you gotta defeat Ganondorf. You're the chosen one. You're Link.
Yeah.
Or whatever you
and
said.
So, and then later on, obviously now they tell stories a very different way as well, typically speaking.
Yeah. Mario's actually a good example of that too, because the Mario games basically don't have a story. Like, I gotta save the princess from the castle. and I
Right.
gotta get Bowser. That was all reliant on the idea of what we would refer to as platformers now. The idea of being able to jump and run and do these, different maneuvers through a game world, so that you can get from one side of the screen to the next. And so you did have to rely a lot on gameplay. Another good example of that is the arcade, the thing that is dead now. But once upon a time, arcades were there, and they didn't really have very good graphics, especially in the 80s when they really became popular. 70s and 80s, I should say. And so what they had to rely on is the fact that Breakout or Centipede or Space Invaders was a pretty fun little game loop that you could get into that was not very complicated, but was pretty straightforward in that you could pick up and play with only a couple of buttons and a controller in your, an analog stick in your hand. A joystick, I should say. And so they had to make do with that because of the technical limitations. I wonder, there's a question that I guess I would ask you. Do you think that the lack of technical limitations that game companies have now has hindered creative ways to address, like, gameplay in game creation? Like, has it been that now that they don't have a lot of the limitations, like, for instance, in the Space Invaders case that you have, that it has hindered the creativity of coming around with new innovative problem solving for games?
I don't think so. I think it gives them more ways they can problem solve, because without having that limitation of graphics and having a 3D world, you have much more you can do. Like Breath of the Wild, for instance, as an example of problem solving, is there are multitudes of ways to solve it aside from the one that they intend. If you want to kill Ganon at the very beginning of the game, you can technically do it if you've got the skill for it. You could kill him with a stick. Yeah. So I think depending on the way they implement the game elements, there's way more ways you can do a lot of things. And I think it's really cool. Like Portal, for instance, as linear of a game as that actually is, there are only a finite number of solutions that you can do each run. Right. Yeah. But it will feel like you're solving the puzzle differently.
Oh, sure.
But in reality, you're solving it with the same exact mechanic every single time.
Right. Exactly. And then you get like a couple different mechanics when they got around to Portal 2. But again, they had a lot more resources when they did Portal 2, because it wasn't just like a mod team that was trying to make it. It was like actually in development from Valve. So with the same mod team, I believe, that originally did Portal. But I feel like there is, in the they don't make them like they used to kind of camp that we're talking about right now, a problem with a lot of very big game studios that will tout that their graphics look amazing and that their sound is incredible and it is a very cinematic experience, which I can understand why they would want to tout it. Granted, you definitely want to show that off, but that they play a lot of things safe in the way that they want to build their game. They don't innovate as much because of that, because they want to be able to take it to investors, because again, new age of video gaming, the board of directors and the investors and the stockholders are the main key here. It's not just some dudes in their basement or whatever, just hammering out some code and putting a couple pixels on screen. And so they're likely to say, oh yeah, like, you see this thing that worked over here? We're gonna make 10 more of those. Instead of coming up with something innovative or different, you don't see as many new IPs anymore. You usually see sequels or derivatives therein. People will make something that they already know succeeded as another game. It's why, like, From Software makes Dark Souls, and then there's like 50 Souls like games after that because, well, the formula worked and people liked it, so we'll just sell to them. We can do that with the stealth genre, we could do it with platforming after it came out, and be able to say, yeah, remember this type of game? We made one of those. Instead of the innovative idea of like, yeah, but what did you do new? What did you do that's different about it? What's your hook?
Right.
You don't necessarily have to do as many of those hooks to sell your game now. You can say, well, you know, it's Dark Souls, but it's Victorian London. Okay. And that's not bad. Like, it might be a really good game. Lies of P looks really interesting. Steel Rising I might play at some point. And yeah, they're different settings with the same basic mechanics. Granted. But I think it gets very easy to go into those... get into those sort of tunnel vision sort of things where I just do the thing again and again repetitiously. It's like the Ubisoft syndrome of like, well, we found out that this open world with like 5 different basic kinds of missions that you go on and an interconnected story works really well. We'll make all of our games look like that because, frankly, we sold a lot of copies of Assassin's Creed.
Right.
So yeah, I feel like innovation isn't quite as high anymore because they focused on the actual production quality. I do appreciate it, though, when you have really unique and innovative titles, but unfortunately a lot of those are coming from the indie space. They're not coming from the big game studios. And so that's why you get games like this year, like Cult of the Lamb or stuff like that, where it's like, we're going to take something and then you just run a cult. Just run a cult. It's cool. You'll love it. And you're a lamb. Why not? You just don't see those from big studios, which I understand. They have big budgets and they have a lot of investors and they need to please them and they need to do something that's safe, that just looks really good on screen, that people are going to want to invest in early. But that is indeed not the way they used to make them. The way they used to make them is that you'd have this small, very small team with very limited resources at their disposal, and they'd say, hey, what's a fun gameplay loop? Or like, what's a fun style? And then let's just use whatever resources we have to put a game out. Like when a new technology would come out and you could figure out a way to do it, like when they did Prince of Persia and it was rotoscoping. Like, oh, we'll utilize that. And then how are we going to do that? And we're going to put it into like a 2D adventure game. Let's see if that works. Yeah, they just don't do that now because the focus point has been changed from one priority to another. So, now that being said, I do like pretty graphics and orchestral sound design. So I am of two minds on this. It's a double-bladed sword. I just really appreciate it, though, when I can get high production value and innovative content. Those don't come around very often, though. And so, any other thoughts that you have on the games not being the way they used to as we get into old man yells at cloud syndrome?
No, I think just storytelling these days is a lot different than it was when they didn't have the graphics to back it up.
Right.
It's good in some cases, but worse in other cases. But it really depends on the game. As I was saying, the Legacy of Kain games before, really good storytelling, really great narrative, but it also pulls you through it. Console games were different than PC anyways.
Sure.
Consoles games couldn't have as much space to deal with, so you had to like have a narrative and then pull your players through that narrative.
Yeah.
Versus the big open world epic RPGs of Bethesda, which are giant open worlds with not very great storytelling, let's be honest.
Yeah.
Maybe occasionally decent environmental storytelling, but the main story is not. There's too much and too shallow.
Yeah, and the thing that's actually interesting about the Fallout games, too, is that a lot of their very straightforward environmental storytelling can be far, far more interesting than a lot of their scripted ones. I had just gone back to play Fallout 3 for reasons. I don't know why. And it was Game of the Year version. I think it actually was just free on something. But I went to do the Point Lookout content, and there are some cabins that you can go to, and you go in there, and there's all of these skeletons that are like posed on the bed and on totems and stuff, and you could sit there and stare at that for a while and be like, what happened here? Because you know that there's a story that they're telling with a lot of those scenes. When you see like the skeleton in the bathtub, and there's like three pool balls and a pool cue over on the side, and the bathtub's fill, and you're like, okay, how'd we get here? Like, you can tell that they were trying to set up scenes and ideas in each one of these little places where it's just the visual reference, and there's no notes, and there's no audio logs. It's just the scene that you step into. Other good examples of that, too, is games like Abzu or Journey, where it is completely wordless, but they use that stylistic graphic style to tell their story through pictures, essentially, through the actual graphics themselves, and they do a very good job of that. Trying to think, Inside was like that as well. Inside has no dialogue.
Playdead's Inside?
Playdead's Inside, yes.
Sorry, that's the whole title of it, yeah. No, I've seen that game played, by, of all things, by Let's Game It Out.
Yes.
Years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And they did the whole game, and it was really interesting. There's very little dialogue, and it's usually other people yelling, but your character does not talk.
Yeah. Which is very similar to the game that they did before that, which was Limbo. Which also was wordless storytelling.
And linear.
Yes, completely linear in the way that it was presented, which is a little bit different than the walking simulators that usually do have narration and have talking parts over it. But yeah, being able to use your graphics, your style, and your environmental layout in order to tell your story can prove to be really, really effective, and that is something that they couldn't do back in our day when they just did not have the technical capabilities to do so. But I guess I would pass a question along to anyone listening to this. If you'd like to weigh in on what do you think we lost along the way? Basically, like, what do you think has improved and what has been lost in the process of going through the 70s up to today? We're like 50 years into video gaming specifically, and now's a good time to kind of reflect along what was done better then and what's done better now. Please get at us either in the video comments, or you can join us over on Discord, or if you have that magical thing called Anchor, you can even leave a voice clip on there. We might use it on the show. Well, Alex, this has been kind of like an impromptu, chill stream sort of episode. Stream of consciousness.
It's been good. It's been decent.
We've been kayaking down a stream of consciousness. So
Rapids away.
Rapids away, exactly. But hey, if folks would like to hear more, maybe structured episodes of the show, Okay, well, assume that they did for a second. Where could they
I think this was structured. We went on topic for them. It was good.
Most of it, yeah, I think so. But anyway, if they wanted to find other episodes of the show in general, where could they go?
You can find other episodes of our show over at TotalPebbleKnockdown.com.
Excellent. Feel free to also catch us on social media. I am at Citanium.
I am at EXP Limited, and our show is over at Pebble Knockdown.
There you go. I almost said Delph, too. But Pebble Knockdown. Make sure to check us out on every podcast app known to mankind. I mentioned it earlier, but yes, Anchor, we do voice clips over there because that is where we are hosted. And feel free to also check out our Patreon because we have full, mostly unedited, just longer, in-depth video presentations that we do before any of the individual ones come out. So you can check those out as well. And I guess for this one, we're going to just chill our way out of here. We're going to just keep on heading down that stream of consciousness to its end conclusion. And I think that end conclusion is Bulbasaur.
Right.
It always
Harkening
is.
back to the old days.
Bulbasaur.
Bulbasaur.
Always Bulbasaur. I need the remake of Doki Doki Literature Club where Monica is just Bulbasaur. Just Bulbasaur. That's great. So Charizard, Pikachu, Squirtle, and Bulbasaur are the 4 pick-me girls.
No, it's gotta be Charmeleon, because he's angsty.
Oh, yeah. So that's Yuri.
No. Oh, yes, sorry.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I was thinking of Natsuki.
No, Squirtle is Natsuki.
Oh.
The attitude,
high energy,
the Squirtle squad.
high energy.
Yeah,
Yep.
exactly. And that would mean that, Sayori would be Pikachu.
Sayori would be dead.
Dead Pikachu.
Dead Pikachu theory.
Yeah. Oh, wasn't there... What was the weird Pikachu, the off-brand Pikachu that they had in that? Remember the one that like looks kind of like a Pikachu, like it has a Pikachu-ish face, but it's actually like a ghost. What is that?
Mimikyu?
There you go, that one. Mimikyu.
Ah.
Mimikyu. Maybe that's what she
Mimikyu.
is.
Anyways, this has been a terrible rebrand of Doki Doki Literature Club, but they haven't done anything with it since Doki Doki Plus.
You mean Pokey Pokey Literature Club?
Wow.
It was right there.
Wow.
That's the episode title. Pokey Pokey Literature Club.
I hate that. It better not be, because that'll be like a what the fuck?
Anywho. So anyway, thank you for joining the Pokey Pokey Literature Club. We will see you next time on Total Pebble Knockdown. Goodbye for now.
Bye forever.